Welcome to Agri-Pulse Newsmakers, where we aim to take you to the heart of ag policy. I'm Hannah Pagel. Our guest this week is Gabe Vasquez, who joins us to discuss the latest on the Farm Bill, conservation programs, and Forest Service staffing. But first, here's this week's headlines. The House overwhelmingly approved a bipartisan tax package Wednesday night that includes improvements to valuable expensing provisions used by farmers as well as an expansion of the child tax credit. The deal would raise limits on Section 179 expensing provision and restore a bonus depreciation provision to 100% until 2025, aligning it with the expiration of several other Tax Cut and Jobs Act provisions. Farmers use these provisions to lower the cost of equipment and machinery. The bill also expands the child tax credit. The maximum credit per child will rise to $1,800 this year and will eventually climb to $2,000 by 2025. The bill passed the House 357 to 70 and now goes to the Senate. A court rejected a challenge by agricultural employers to the Labor Department's 2022 H-2A rule. The National Council of Agricultural Employers argued the department illegally withdrew the Trump administration's rule, which was published 9 days before President Biden took office. However, the court ruled the department followed notice and comment procedures, and the Trump administration's rule never became official because the Federal Register never made it available for public inspection. The rule strengthened standards for housing and meals while clarifying agricultural associations can be held liable for rule violations by farmers. And finally, some producers are still having trouble receiving government funding through conservation programs despite additional authorized funding through the Inflation Reduction Act. According to a new report by the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, about a quarter of producers who applied to the Environmental Quality Incentive Program were awarded contracts in fiscal year 2023. 31% of Conservation Stewardship Program applicants were awarded contracts that year. The report shows IRA funding has helped more producers get into these programs, but the percentage of applicants who secured spots in the programs remains similar to previous years. Congressman Gabe Vasquez represents New Mexico's 2nd District. He says the conservation title in the Farm Bill needs continuous investments.
Well, look, I think that there's a clear demand for these conservation programs in the Farm Bill, whether it's EQIP, CSP, or RCPP, programs that are oversubscribed, that are in high demand. Right now, I think we have a challenge to meet, and that includes, making sure that USDA has the staffing opportunities and levels to be able to meet the demand. I think that's one of the things that we have to deal with over the next 5 years of the Farm Bill is to make sure that EQIP, CSP, and RCPP, with the additional funding that they have from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, in addition to other programs administered by USDA, that the actual agencies have the capacity to distribute these grants, to be able to take these applications in and to process them in a timely manner. And so that's something I'm gonna work on with Deputy Secretary Xochitl Torres Small, who used to represent my district, as well as Secretary Vilsack.
So kind of zooming out here, given the work that needs to be done on appropriations, the Farm Bill, it's also an election year. What are you hearing about a timeline for an upcoming Farm Bill?
Well, look, this Congress is right now very dysfunctional, and I wish that we would have passed the Farm Bill last year because we spent a lot of time. In fact, my first year in Congress here, between the National Defense Authorization Act and the Farm Bill, that's where we spent most of our time. And so to see the can get kicked down the road for another year on the Farm Bill, it doesn't give certainty to producers. It doesn't give certainty to farm workers. It doesn't give certainty to anybody that's working in the agriculture industry. And so I want to make sure that I do my part and that we work to get a Farm Bill passed as soon as possible. Certainly, there's other considerations right now before Congress that are very important. Appropriations bills, of course, we can't stop kicking the can down the road on this budget bill. So we need to get that done first. But soon after that, we need to make sure that we start working on this farm bill as soon as possible. So I can't give you any timelines. We'll leave that up to the Republican leadership and the chair of the Agriculture Committee.
We'll be right back with more from Congressman Vasquez right after this.
Farmers are always there for each other. We shed tears together, we celebrate together, but we also grow together. Farm Bureau is the largest general farm organization in the country. We have the farmers' back. If you're a farmer and you're not a member, we would welcome you into our Farm Bureau family. And if you want to know more about agriculture, come be part of this great family.
Regenerative poultry production is a process by which nature can actually recapture and restore the energy that is being taken out of a space.
Farm Credit helped Rahi build his dream of regenerative poultry farming and encouraging fellow immigrants to find community in agriculture.
Nothing beats a farm. I'm just pursuing happiness.
Learn more at farmcredit.com/beginning.
Welcome back. Congressman Vasquez recently called on the Office of Personnel Management to find solutions to the staffing shortages faced by the United States Forest Service. He says updated staffing levels are necessary for fighting and preventing wildfires.
Well, an understaffed Forest Service for my state is a risk, and it's a risk that we can't afford to take. We're recovering from New Mexico's two largest wildfires in 2022, one of them which was actually started by the Forest Service. And so in my meetings with Forest Service management, I've heard repeatedly about the agency's inability to hire and retain enough employees to adequately staff our national forest. We have 5 of them in my district alone. The bureaucracy, the time that it takes to vet these employees, the time that it takes to find folks who will stay for more than just one position before moving on to the next is a huge challenge. And so when we talk about why prescribed burn management in a state like New Mexico isn't what it should be, likely it is because untrained staff or understaffed Forest Service units are not doing the job that they're supposed to do. And so we have to make sure that in places like the Gila National Forest that just underwent a forest plan revision, or the Lincoln National Forest, or the Cibola National Forest, that when we have these forest plan revisions in place, that we actually have the adequate staff for management, for monitoring, law enforcement, and all the things that these forest plans are designed to do. Otherwise, we have plans without the staff, and just that's not going to be a good recipe for our national forest.
Let's kind of talk about some more of the solutions that you would like to see for increasing staff levels. Is this a funding issue or is it an educational issue?
No, I think it's a bureaucracy issue. I think that there's a prolonged hiring process here. What I'm hearing, in fact, just from conversations recently with the supervisor at the Gila National Forest, is that there are positions that need to be in place in a month at the most, but it's going to take them 6 months to hire because of the bureaucratic process that it takes to get folks in the door. And so I think from a streamlining perspective, it needs to happen at the very top levels. And so USDA needs to make sure that when we talk about forest health and we talk about preventing these massive wildfires, and I mean just general forest management, that if we can't get these positions in place within a shorter time frame, we're actually impacting not just the forest, but the surrounding communities in a very negative way. And so that's one of the things that we can do, is cut down on that hiring time. I think that'd be the most efficient way to get folks in the door.
So kind of switching gears here before we wrap up our conversation, ag labor continues to be a major concern for farmers. But what do you think it's going to take to get Congress to actually pick up and pass ag labor reform?
Well, we just wrapped up our first year of a bipartisan ag labor task force that was initiated by Chairman Thompson and Ranking Member Scott, that I was a part of, that had some very productive discussions about what the future of a program like the H2A and H2B programs might look like. Now, we brought in experts from across the country in different fields about how we could expand these programs and how immigrant labor stands to be really the solution for everything from potential forestry solutions, timber harvesting, to our own chili crop here in New Mexico, and onion harvesting. The H-2A visa program is very limited in scope, and I think folks have been working on this for many years. The Farm Worker Modernization Act is a great example of a bipartisan bill that never made it through to the president's desk, although it had wide bipartisan support. And so looking at the Farm Workforce Support Act, which is a bill that I introduced, it actually seeks to make sure that we have the evidence that migrant farm workers are incredibly important to this economy, and to be able to help support a bill like the Farm Worker Modernization Act, because that's what I'm hearing from producers on the ground, that they don't have enough labor, they don't have enough workers, and we can meet the demand with the immigration challenges that we face if we can just work in Congress in a bipartisan way to modernize our immigration system that allows agricultural workers to be in these positions.
Well, that's all we have time for today. Congressman Vasquez, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time as well.
We'll be right back with this week's panel discussion. But first, our Andrew Hunnicky takes a look at what farmers believe are the benefits of planting cover crops in this week's Ag by the Numbers.
One of the focus points in our recent exclusive poll of more than 600 producers was why many of them do and don't plant cover crops. This first chart shows what they thought were some of the benefits of planting cover crops. 87% said soil erosion, followed by soil health with 81% and weed management with 65%. On the other hand, this second chart shows some of the reasons we were given for not planting cover crops, and it was a tie at the top. 39% said cost and that they were uncertain of the effectiveness of cover crops. Availability of moisture was third with 36%. For Agri-Pulse, I'm Andrew Hunnicky.
The Senate and House Ag Committees are busy working on the next Farm Bill, which will cover commodities, specialty crops, livestock, and more. This legislation will impact every farmer, rancher, and rural business for the next 5 years. Make sure you don't miss insights and analytics that only Agri-Pulse and its top-notch team of well-connected experts can provide. Register today for a free trial at agripulse.com and click the subscribe button, or email us at pam@agri-pulse.com. You don't want to miss this Farm Bill coverage.
Agriculture Future of America is a nonprofit building transformational leaders in food and agriculture. AFA prepares college students to join the workforce as innovative and engaged young professionals who will shape the future of agriculture. Head to agfuture.org to find out how you can get involved.
Did you know Agri-Pulse has all your favorite podcasts, including Open Mic, Newsmakers, and Drive Time? Take us wherever you go. Subscribe at agripulse.com or on Spotify, Google Play, or Apple Podcasts.
Welcome back to Agri-Pulse Newsmakers, where we're excited to get into our panel discussion today. Joined this week by Dave White with the 9B Group and James McKitrick with the American Forest Foundation. And Dave, my first question is to you. The Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy recently came out with a report that says producers are still having trouble receiving government funding through conservation programs, despite the funds that were allocated during the Inflation Reduction Act. Why do you think that is?
I think what the report was referring to is the backlog. For years we've had a tremendous backlog in people trying to get into conservation programs. And just not having enough money. But now the Inflation Reduction Act has kind of flipped the script on that. But we've got to remember we're only in year 2 of the Inflation Reduction Act. The big money that is coming is going to be this year and the 2 subsequent years from now. So I think you're going to see that change as more farmers do get into the programs. I don't think a backlog is all that bad, because the way these programs are operated, at least the NRCS ones, is there are a lot of local input. Conservation districts have a lot to say. They develop ranking criteria. So what's important in Cherokee County, Iowa may not be important in Roosevelt County, Montana. And each county has an application, and if you meet those criteria the local people want, then your odds of being accepted are pretty high. And if you're doing something there that's really not germane, then you might not get accepted. So I think there's some good things about a backlog, but I think this whole influx of IRA money is really going to see a lot more producers being able to participate. And I think it's wonderful that you have that much interest in conservation.
So there have been talks about moving that IRA funding that was allocated to the Farm Bill's conservation title to other parts of the Farm Bill. But as the former NRCS chief at USDA, does the agency have enough staff to deliver those dollars before the funding expires?
You know, it's no secret. You need people to design and help implement these conservation practices. There is some movement on Capitol Hill. Senator Braun in the Senate, along with Senator Bennett and Senator Marshall, have introduced the Technical Service Provider Access Bill. In the House, you've got Representative Baird and Representative Spanberger have introduced the companion bill. And these are very, they're the chair and ranking of each House and Senate Ag Committee Conservation Subcommittee. So there's a good chance this is going to come through. And this really opens the door to increase technical service providers helping producers. I agree that NRCS doesn't have enough people. They're trying to hire more people. But there is some real movement on Capitol Hill, thanks to these members, that will help NRCS be able to access more private sector technical assistance. And this is going to be critical to getting the Inflation Reduction Act funds obligated.
And James, the Inflation Reduction Act also allocated funds to the forestry programs. Can you provide an update to us about how the forestry industry is utilizing those funds?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was a fantastic effort by the Forest Service to, I think the first round of $150 million specifically for small underserved landowners participating in voluntary environmental service markets like the carbon markets. I know there's that's a small chunk of, I think, 450 that's been allocated in that general direction, and we're working with the Forest Service and providing as much assistance as we can to make sure that those funds get deployed before the money runs out or the administration changes and this stops being a priority. In terms of the other forestry funding, I know the Forest Service is working diligently for stewardship money. I believe there's Wood Innovation Grant plus up as well. And so we're continuing to work with the Forest Service and provide as much support as we can to make sure that those funds get to ground and used efficiently.
We'll be right back with more from our panel right after this.
Farmers are always there for each other. We shed tears together, we celebrate together, but we also grow together. Farm Bureau is the largest general farm organization in the country. We have the farmers' back. If you're a farmer and you're not a member, we would welcome you into our Farm Bureau family. And if you want to know more about agriculture, come be part of this great family.
Looking closer, seeing further. That's how we do it. At Curious Plot, we're driven to find what's next for agriculture, animal care, and food. We stay curious because that's what it takes to grow understanding. That's how we plot strategies and tell stories that get results time after time. Marketing, communications, and consulting that look closer and see further. Curious Plot. We can't wait to help you tell your story.
Welcome back. Our panel discussion continues with the American Forest Foundation's James McKitrick discussing research and development efforts at the U.S. Forest Service.
Yeah, I think one area I do want to pay attention to, though, in terms of staffing is the research and development side of Forest Service. The Forest Inventory and Analysis Program, which is the darling of everyone in the forestry sector, in the conservation, environmental, ENGO sector, has major issues with workforce capacity over the years. And that is something that AFF has been working diligently along with others in the forest sector to be able to remedy, either through the appropriations process or through additional authorities in hopefully the Farm Bill.
And can you provide any update as to what those discussions look like on Capitol Hill to get those resources allocated either in appropriations or the Farm Bill?
Well, I think, as we all know, the appropriations process is working far from normally on Capitol Hill right now. But we're hopeful that if and when there's a farm bill this year, that the chairs of both sides of the four corners will really take a good look at the forest inventory and analysis program and really put their best foot forward. The farm bill, I should say, is really only an authorizing vehicle. So there has to be an additional attention and additional effort with appropriators, and it comes at a challenging time. As I said, the appropriations process isn't working the way it's supposed to be working, right? And frankly, it hasn't for many decades. But the funding environment's restricted, so we just have to put our best foot forward and see what kind of headway we can make in spite of it all.
And Dave, kind of wrapping up the conversation with you, given the work that needs to be done on appropriations, on a farm bill, it's also a presidential election year. What are you hearing about a timeline for the farm bill?
What I'm hearing right now is some naysayers thinking they got to do it real quick, or they're not going to get it done, or it'll have to need another extension. But if I look at the chair and the ranking members of both the Senate and House Ag Committee, I feel pretty confident. Representative Thompson, who's chair of House Ag, has been relentlessly optimistic throughout this process. Senator Stabenow, chair of the Senate Ag Committee, is experienced. She's done this before. She knows what needs to be done. Ranking Member Scott, Ranking Member Senator Bozeman, they're very knowledgeable. The folks at the tiller know what they're doing, and they're backed up by an incredible staff. The House Ag Committee staff has got over 50 years experience in developing farm bills. The Senate has got some of the finest young minds in the business. So there may be other things that intercede and damage this or derail it, but it won't be because we don't have a fine group of people trying to get this farm bill done.
Well, Dave and James, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be right back with more Agri-Pulse Newsmakers, but first, Andrew Hunnicky gives an update on ERP payments in this week's Map It Out.
USDA has paid out more than $8.3 billion worth of funds through the Emergency Relief Program. The program provides funding for farmers whose crops were impacted by disasters like hurricanes, wildfires, winter storms, and droughts. This map shows how much funding each state has received. North Dakota leads the way with nearly $1.2 billion received. Texas, California, South Dakota, and Minnesota round out the top 5. Taking a closer look at these figures, there were actually 2 phases of ERP payments. Phase 2 funding went to anyone with an eligible loss that did not receive Phase 1 payments. Of the $8.4 billion in total funding, $7.4 billion has come through Phase 1 payments, and nearly $880 million has come through Phase 2 payments. According to USDA, more than 302,000 applications have been paid. For Agri-Pulse, I'm Andrew Hunnicky.
It's not as simple just to wake up one day and go, I want to be a conservation farmer. You're changing how your farming practice is done. You're changing your operation.
Farm Credit supported John and Kelly Watley as they shifted to more sustainable farming, improving the environment where they farm and live. Learn more at farmcredit.com/climate.
The Senate and House Ag Committees are busy working on the next Farm Bill, which will cover commodities, specialty crops, livestock, and more. This legislation will impact every farmer, rancher, and rural business for the next 5 years. Make sure you don't miss insights and analytics that only Agri-Pulse and its top-notch team of well-connected experts can provide. Register today for a free trial at agripulse.com and click the subscribe button, or email us at pam@agri-pulse.com. You don't want to miss this Farm Bill coverage.
Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Agri-Pulse Newsmakers. Before we let you go, here's what's on the horizon for the upcoming week. USDA will release its farm income forecast Wednesday. Our Philip Brasher will be at the Clean Fuels Conference in Fort Worth Monday through Wednesday, and Agri-Pulse's Sarah Wyant will be at the Crop Insurance Industry Convention Sunday through Wednesday. And finally, look for me, Spencer Chase, and Steve Davies at the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture's Winter Policy Conference Monday through Wednesday. We'll continue to follow the latest in farm policy news at agripulse.com. For Agri-Pulse Newsmakers, I'm Hannah Pagel. Take care of yourself.
Newsmakers is a production of Agri-Pulse Communications. For more ag policy news, visit agripulse.com. You can also find our new content on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to follow Agri-Pulse and our correspondents on social media to get breaking news and more.